Hello, this is Good Morning Transfers. 17 days to go and Liverpool could be about to miss out on another target with Chelsea ready to swoop in for Romeo Lavia. It's left Jamie Carragher furious with the club's transfer business this window. We'll be discussing that, plus who needs to do what after the first weekend of the Premier League season. And we'll tell you where Sandro Tonali celebrated his first Newcastle goal, all in the company of Sam Obaseki, Olivier Bazaglo and James Savundra. But we start with Chelsea. Moises Caicedo's move is now done. Next on Chelsea's hit list is Romeo Lavia, whose preference is to join them despite Liverpool agreeing a £60 million deal with Southampton for the midfielder. But as things stand, there is no agreement with Chelsea yet, but it's thought that one is close. Right, Olivia, what have you made of all of this?
I just think it's been an absolutely crazy saga involving Liverpool and Chelsea. I think there was no secret of Chelsea's interest in Lavia, even back in January, because Chelsea put in a deadline day bid for him. So we always knew they were interested. It sort of just kept quiet because I think Chelsea were going for Caicedo as their number one. So, yeah, the fact that it's all come about isn't necessarily surprising. I think one thing we should talk about is his relationship with Joe Shields. Now, Joe Shields was head of recruitment at Southampton. He was the player that brought in Lavia, and now he's gone to Chelsea, and he is the co-director of recruitment and talent at Chelsea. And it feels like he's been the one that has led this drive to bring Lavia to Stamford Bridge. I think there is an appeal of Chelsea's project, you know, for these young players. Lavia is just 19 years old, on long contracts, that financial security as well. I think there is way more competition for places in midfield at Chelsea compared to Liverpool, but he's obviously up for the fight if he does want to pick Chelsea over Liverpool. And one thing I would say, I think it's interesting, does Chelsea's success over the last 20 years come into this? Because for these young players that are 19, 20, 21, all they have seen, really, is Chelsea and Manchester City. That's all they've seen, is those two be the two most successful clubs. Chelsea, I don't think any team has won more than Chelsea in the last 20 years. So does that come into it as well? Obviously, you know, Manchester United, Arsenal, Liverpool, huge clubs. But more recent, it's been all Chelsea. So I do wonder if that comes into the thinking of these young players. Well,
Chelsea fans, we do want to hear from you how happy you are with your business so far this summer. Hashtag transfer talk. How much do you want Romeo Lavia? Liverpool fans will get your views later on in the hour. I can assure you we'll have your say as well. But Sam, do Chelsea actually need an extra central midfielder?
I think it depends on how you look at it. When you look at the midfielders that they've brought in since January, a lot of young midfielders promising in Europe, but at the same time they do lack Premier League experience. And I think Lavia is, like Liv said, is a player that Chelsea were linked with since last summer. I remember, like you said, the deadline bid of £50 million, which was the same bid because they knew the quality that he had. He didn't have that experience then. He went through the whole season and they realised this is someone that would be a great option for the team. And a lot of people are saying, does this mean that him and Caicedo are going to be fighting for the same spot? I don't think so. I think when you look at the game against Liverpool on Sunday, there could be a few games where you see Caicedo, Lavia and Enzo all playing in midfield, and that would just be complete dominance. And that's a Chelsea fan talking. I would be quite excited to see that. But also, when you look at the players that Chelsea have lost in the transfer window, we've lost 6 midfielders with Premier League experience that have won trophies at Chelsea. So you did need to bring players in with Santos and Ugochukwu and Caicedo and Chukwuemeka. There's not that much Premier League experience. There's players that are really promising for Chelsea, but I don't know if Poch was in a place where he could trust them going through the whole season, you know, playing so many minutes. So I think it does make sense for Chelsea. It's going to add a lot of competition, but when you look at the last team that Chelsea, when Chelsea won the Premier League, there was options off the bench. I believe Cesc Fabregas was off the bench when Matic and Kante were starting. So competition is not a bad thing. We've seen at City, they always have the players to come on and that can challenge for those starting spots. And I think that's what Chelsea are trying to do.
If Lavia does go to Stamford Bridge, will that be the end of Chelsea's spending?
Well, it's strange to think the fact that Chelsea have spent nearly £1 billion since the new owners have come in, but I don't think they are going to be done just yet, because with Kepa moving to Real Madrid, you'd think Chelsea would be in the market for a new goalkeeper. Now, the only question is whether Chelsea looks to do what Arsenal have done and have 2 number ones competing for one position, or whether or not they see Robert Sanchez as the number one and they bring in somebody who's happy to play a deputy role, or perhaps Mauricio Pochettino's happy with what he has already with the younger players. Marcus Bettinelli out of injury at the moment, but he has on a long-term contract with the club, so maybe he could be the number 2. And then Pochettino spoke the other day about looking to replace Christopher Nkunku, who's going to be out for a period of time. So he said they're looking at short, medium, long-term options to replace him. However, if Chelsea are signing Lavia and Caicedo, then you'd think it's unlikely they could bring in another high-profile forward to replace Nkunku for this period of time, unless perhaps they look to potentially offload the likes of Chalobah or Conor Gallagher in the next few weeks.
Well, Moise Caicedo, he completed his move, the British record transfer from Brighton to Chelsea. That was last night, £115 million deal, moving Chelsea to the biggest spenders in the Premier League. So this is them so far in this window, about £75 million or so more than Arsenal. But then if we have a look at their signings overall, we know it's no surprise that Chelsea have been spending a lot of money. Now, this doesn't take into account the amount of money that they have recouped, which I guess is quite important, James, when it comes to how Chelsea can afford to do this, because loads of people have been tweeting us in the last few days saying this can't surely satisfy financial fair play rules. And there's some of the money that's come in, and that is quite important, well, very important. A lot of money and a lot of wages as well.
Yeah, so
net spends about 50 million.
Yeah, it's pretty complex here. We mentioned Chelsea, if they do sign Romeo Lavia, they'll take their spending past £900 million since the takeover. But Simon Jordan broke it down quite well on TalkSport yesterday, a former Premier League owner himself. When you look at what Chelsea spent last season, more than £500 million, but with those 8-year contracts, that £600 million is averaging as around 75 million a year. It's worth pointing out, though, that the Premier League are likely to change their rules and go in line with what UEFA are doing, putting a limit on 5 years that a transfer can be spread across. So this year, if you take the 300 million that Chelsea are set to spend, maybe more, works out as 60 million a year for 5 years. So if you have the 75 million and the 60 million, that gives you 135 million on spending. But then we mentioned and we looked at Chelsea's outgoings there, more than 200 million already. We expect that could increase as well. And actually, when you look at what Chelsea have done since the 13-14 season, £1.2 billion they've brought in when it comes to player sales. So actually this season, from an accounting point of view, they're actually in a decent position because transfer fees are registered in the books immediately rather than across a period of time, which we see with the signings. So when we see players being brought in, that's across a period of time. With players being sold, that immediate fee shows up on the books. So the question is, though, whether or not this is going to be sustainable for Chelsea or not, because with all the losses they've made in recent time, at some point they are going to have to make a profit, so they can do that with even more player sales, which we could expect in time, better commercial deals. They've still not got a shirt sponsor in place, and also returning to the Champions League will bring in huge revenue as well. So whilst it looks on the outside that Chelsea really are pushing things from a financial fair play point of view, in some ways they're in not the worst position, not as bad a position as some would think.
Yeah, you've explained that very well. I think a few people might be rewinding and listening to it again, because you've got a lot of information in there, James. Really well done with that. By the way, Chelsea fans, we do still want to hear from you. #TransferTalk on your summer deals so far. Olivia and Sam talking about who else could possibly leave Chelsea. Are there some players who could be deemed surplus to requirements to boost more funds?
Well, I think just initially, like the midfield options, Chelsea needed to replace their midfield. That was a priority going into this window, and they've successfully done that if they add Lavia as well. It's another brilliant signing. But you had Leslie Okachukwu, who came on against Liverpool. It's probably likely he'll go on loan because you've got Enzo Fernandez, Caicedo, Santos and Lavia really to fight for two positions, I think, in central midfield, because even though Conor Gallagher did an absolutely brilliant job there against Liverpool, I think with Nkunku out injured, he could perhaps be playing slightly further up in the Carney Chukwuemeka role, the role that he played as well. But Sam, as well as that, we've also got other players that are not even training with the first team that are on big wages, big money that could be going as well, don't we?
Yeah, and I think Pochettino has made it pretty clear the type of energy he wants in and around the squad. We heard reports of Lukaku training alone, Ziyech as well recovering from injury, and I think these are two players that has been reported widely that they want to make moves away. I know Lukaku is a player that came in at Chelsea, didn't really work out, and a few moves didn't really materialise, but it's definitely a move that they're trying to get done. Ziyech as well, I think it was just a medical away from moving, and I think maybe he's going to hopefully, recover from his injury and then make the move as well. But we've seen Hudson-Odoi, he's linked with Fulham. I think it's just the finer details that they're trying to work out, and I think that would be a great move for him. But like Liv said, I think a lot of the moves getting closer to the deadline will be loan moves, especially to just almost get rid of some of the wages on the bills also. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of movement.
There's a couple of other players as well. You know, Newcastle have been linked with Marc Cucurella on loan with a potential option or obligation. We don't know. We know they're interested in a left-back. Also, there's been reports that Trevor Chalobah could go as well with the signing of Axel Disasi. It's then like, what do you do with Chalobah? So
Lewis Hall's another player who may go, get some minutes as well.
Yeah, so I think, you know, there is still a lot of business to be done in terms of outgoings for Chelsea, and I still think we will see a fair few Chelsea players leave before deadline day.
Yeah, I did ask James if it could be the end of their spending if Lavia comes in. Do you think the two of you, do you two agree that could be it, or are you expecting more?
Oh, I think
a goalkeeper definitely. Now Kepa's gone out on loan. I think a goalkeeper.
What do you want from a goalkeeper? Do you want someone competing with Sanchez, or would you want just an understudy now?
I think it depends. I think competition, because like we've seen, especially in the last few years at Chelsea, it brings out the best in the keepers. I think Sanchez, from the position that he was coming in at Brighton, I think it'll be healthy for him to have competition like that. That would be challenging for his spot. But he played really well against Liverpool as well. It also depends on who's available on the market.
There's not really many, is there, when you think of
top goalkeepers that you're gonna bring in. So
and they probably don't want to spend a ridiculous amount on a goalkeeper, given how much they've already spent in this window.
Yeah, Jay's been in touch to say that he still thinks they need an attacking midfielder, a striker and a winger at Chelsea.
Calm it down.
Yeah, I feel like it's a little bit too much.
Scott's a Liverpool fan who is questioning the financial fair play again. I did say that a lot of people might need to rewind. Listen to what James said. Very, very interesting. It kind of breaks it all down nicely for you. Now, I know that Olivia and Sam have been very much looking forward to this part, because they've put together a starting 11 at Chelsea. Now, caveat here, everybody is fit, OK? So this is without injury, suspensions or anything like that. And I would just like to say that although James and I would have liked to have got involved in this, we didn't have a word. We didn't have a chance to get a word in with these two. So Olivia and Sam, you can talk us through it.
We were actually quite in sync with this, to be fair. I'll go through the back five.
Yeah.
Sanchez in goal obviously makes sense. He's the only available keeper at the moment. James, right back, probably one of the best right backs in the world. Thiago Silva and Cole will complement each other perfectly. And then Chilwell left back. I think that is probably one of the best backlines that is in the Premier League, if not the world.
Okay, I mean, I don't think you can argue with that at all. And when you look at that midfield too, you know, we had this conversation on this show yesterday about where that ranks, and there's not many midfields in the Premier League that are arguably as good as Fernandes and Caicedo, albeit we haven't seen them play together just yet, so it'll be interesting to see. But like Thiago Silva and Levi Colwill, I think they will complement each other's game perfectly. I really like Mykhailo Mudryk. I think we've seen glimpses. I think he'll probably start on the bench, but I would love him to start near enough every game. Christopher Nkunku's the frustrating one, because I think against Liverpool, we have had him in that number 10 role, he's that player, just has that bright spark, that something of brilliance, and it's such a shame he's out until January. Raheem Sterling, Premier League experience, he linked up really well with Reece James down that right-hand side against Liverpool. Andy Robertson was really struggling at times to deal with them both. And I've been really impressed. I mean, we were talking earlier about Nicholas Jackson, and you know, his running in behind, he's so direct.
He's really hungry.
He does, he wants it, and
yeah.
I think he will score goals. I do think there was one chance in the first half against Liverpool, a cutback from Reece James, that I think he himself would have wanted to hit the target with, but from what I've seen so far of him in pre-season and that first game against Liverpool, with Konate and Van Dijk, a really tough defensive partnership to come up against, I was really, really pleasantly surprised by him.
OK, so that's a potential starting 11 for Chelsea.
Where does that finish, Tom?
Well, I say that Chelsea will be in the top two. You know that.
Yes. He said it not.
I've made no secret of that. I think they'll finish in the top two. I haven't said who the other one is yet. Talking of the top two, Spain and Sweden are hoping to be in the World Cup final. 0-0 at the moment, almost 15 minutes gone in this semi-final. Remember that they both came through difficult quarter-finals. Spain battled hard to beat the Netherlands 2-1. Sweden also won 2-1 in a difficult game against Japan. It was. So Sweden, Spain at the moment. Remember, the winner, potentially, fingers crossed, will face England in the final. Their semi-final is tomorrow, which we'll keep you up to date with, of course. But at the moment, Spain against Sweden is goalless. Quick line from Sky. Germany and Bayern Munich are interested in signing the Manchester City goalkeeper Stefan Ortega. Bayern are looking for a keeper because Jan Sommer left for Inter Milan. So maybe Stefan Ortega from Manchester City. Now, loads to come as Jamie Carragher labels Liverpool's transfer business an absolute mess, a joke and embarrassing? We'll react to that in a few minutes' time.
to go about it. You just meet the buyout clause. Liverpool have not got deals over the line, and it's been embarrassing the fact that you start with Lavia, don't pay a certain amount, then you go for Caicedo. You know, you get something agreed, and that's why I will not be critical of the owners. They were willing to pay 110 million and break the transfer record, but to go with him when he's been talking to Chelsea for 3 months, now go back to Lavia. I mean, it's an absolute mess.
It's a sore one, isn't it?
It's a joke.
It's not just that. Obviously, they've let Milner, Henderson and Fabinho go before they've got someone in, which Liverpool I always thought were quite smart in making sure they brought the players in before they exposed themselves. Understanding that obviously Milner left and then they got 2 fees for Henderson and Fabinho, but to let both of those go and end up in the position that they're now in. We saw that Enzo Fernandez run there off the back of McAllister. McAllister's a fantastic player, he's a good football player, but you could see that in that holding midfield position. And yesterday, once Chelsea started to get on top, the Liverpool midfield couldn't get a grip of the game. They've got a big problem now. They're going to be panicking in the transfer window in the next 3 weeks, which is, let's say, Liverpool don't do that under Jurgen Klopp. They've been so smooth and efficient in the market.
Right, OK, well, frustrations there from Jamie Carragher. As promised, Liverpool fans, we do want to hear from you now. Are you frustrated? Are you satisfied? Are you relaxed? Are you happy? Let us know. Hashtag transfer talk to have your say. But, James, could you understand the frustrations, if there are any, which there clearly are, with Carragher?
Yeah, I think so, because I think anybody looking at the lineup that was picked at the weekend, without even watching them play, could see how unbalanced this Liverpool team looked. And then when you looked at Chelsea as well, without a number 6, it meant that the game was brilliant to watch for a neutral. It must have been pretty fun for you guys to watch as well. But the fact that Liverpool only had 35% possession in that match is quite incredible, really.
Unheard of.
Against a Chelsea side playing their first game under Mauricio Pochettino, who were able to have a bit more control. And the club had known for some time that Fabinho would depart. Henderson was a bit more of a surprise, but they've known for a few weeks. And yes, they have been proactive in the last couple of weeks trying to bring Lavia and Caicedo in. I will say there were really encouraging signs from McAllister and Szoboszlai at the weekend, but they were crying out for a specialist holding midfielder, defensive midfielder alongside them. Cody Gakpo isn't suited to play in a number 10 role. So they did look like they lacked balance in that team. A number of players have departed, as we can see, that they've missed out and lost a lot of experience in that midfield as well.
Yeah, that's only selected departures. But...
And that's the number of midfield options as well. And then when you consider Sadio Mane leaving the season before, a lot of experience has gone out of this side. I think they are going to be great to watch this season, but one concern would be for Liverpool is the fact is it is one of the biggest clubs in the world. The question you have to ask is why do 2 of the best young players in the world, in Romeo Lavia and Moise Caicedo, not want to join the club? I'm not saying that Liverpool doesn't have the pulling power that it used to, but that is a concern, and it's a big concern. They go into this season without a number 6.
It's some positives, by the way. Those 2 incomings, very, very good players, so it's not all bad news for Liverpool. Yeah. And they've just drawn away at Chelsea in the opening game of the season, 2-2. I mean, that's a good result for Liverpool, so there are positives here as well. Keep these tweets coming in, because at the moment they're not so positive. That's why I'm trying to balance it out here. But one thing, Olivia, that maybe could be questioned is they let Henderson and Fabinho go. OK, fair enough. Maybe they couldn't say no to those. But could they have waited a little bit longer until they got some targets in?
Yeah, I think the Henderson one is understandable, albeit that came as a bit of a surprise. But by that point, they already had McAllister and Szoboszlai in, and they were almost like-for-like replacements, 2 number 8, similar to Jordan Henderson. I think the Fabinho one is the one. You know, I know he didn't quite reach the levels that he has over the sort of 2 or 3 seasons before last. But to let such an important player go in such an important position is what I can't understand. And I know they probably were... They thought that perhaps that Caicedo deal was going to get over the line, and then maybe they thought they could get Lavia if Caicedo didn't work, and Liverpool still might. We're not quite sure where Lavia is going to end up, even though we know he said he prefers Chelsea. But it's just the Fabinho one is the one for me that I think they should have held back on until they absolutely knew they could get someone to replace him. But the fact that Liverpool have missed out on 2 of their top midfield targets this window, it is worrying, and I'm quite surprised the way it's all worked out.
And it looks really last minute when you look at the targets that they have, because like we said, we saw in the last few weeks they were bidding for Lavia and they were getting bids rejected, and everyone understood, because if you don't... We've always said on this show that he doesn't look like the exact replacement for Fabinho, so maybe they were looking at other options. But then to go in with 110 for Caicedo, it means, OK, the funds are there, but maybe you're trying to be a bit smart with the type of business you're doing. But does it mean that if you don't get those 2, you don't have an option other than that. And I think now, after seeing that game, because like you said, it was a very open game, but there was still a sense of control that Chelsea had. Liverpool, McAllister, I think he had a great game.
And so did, I thought Szoboszlai had it.
I thought they were really good, but you could tell that Liverpool system, that number 6 is so crucial to how they play. It literally makes their system work. And I think even their fullbacks, because Trent wasn't as involved in the game as he'd want to, Robertson as well. So, yeah, they need to, I think, I'm just surprised that they haven't had the options, especially if they knew that these players are coming to the end of their time.
I think in some games that probably would work. You know, Jurgen Klopp likes to go for an attacking lineup, and it actually made Mauricio Pochettino change his starting lineup when he saw the way Jurgen Klopp lined up. And you could argue against perhaps some lesser teams in the Premier League going for all-out attack, that might work. But against the bigger top 6, big 6 sides,
away from home as well.
Away from home, that's never going to work. And I think, you know, against a Man City, you can't be playing like that because Haaland would have taken those chances and it would have been a completely different game. But you can see why Jurgen Klopp, you know, it might work in some instances, but it's such an important position. You do not win the Premier League without a world-class or a very, very good number 6.
But they did get a draw, remember, away at Chelsea. Scott Wyatt says, poor business from Liverpool, going for targets that favour moves to other clubs. Supposed to be the biggest rebuild, yet we lose 11 players from the club and sign 2. Something must be wrong behind the scenes. I think Mark Robinson might support probably anyone but Liverpool. He says, I think Liverpool have done good business. It's another year of missing out on Champions League football. We've got another one here from, I've lost a few here actually. Alan says that Liverpool should buy Sangare, that's a defensive midfielder, and Ignacio, who's a centre-back. I'd be happy and glad with that. And Chris says that Liverpool have let the fans down at this stage. Keep these coming in, #transfer talk. But what else do you think they need, though, apart from midfielders? Sam, I mean, there was a mention there for centre-back as well.
Yeah, I think that, like one of the people that tweeted and said Liverpool have done really good business. Like McAllister and Szoboszlai are really good. And when you look at their actual team and their bench as well, they've got more depth in their front line. Defensively, I think that they do need some reinforcements. Maybe not that to start. I know they need a backup right back because Trent Alexander-Arnold, obviously probably one of the best fullbacks in the world, but at the same time, it's good to have cover, especially for a player like him that can also play in midfield as well. I know Liverpool fans have been crying out for another centre-back because Van Dijk is great, but he is coming to the latter stages of his career. Kante is great as well, but he has tendencies to get injured. And then Matip and Gomez, I don't think they're at the level that Klopp demands week in, week out. And then, yeah, I think defensively, that's the areas that we're talking about. But when you look at their front line, they have so many options and so many goals as well. It literally looks like it's just going to be 1 or 2 pieces. I think Nubaid said last week, if they had got Caicedo, that they would have been, you know, one of the best teams in the Premier League. Obviously, that didn't happen, but they're that close for it to be up there.
Poor Nubaid, not here to defend him. Jackie says, big mistake by Liverpool letting Fabinho go and not getting Lavia earlier in the window. Mingeli aims his anger at FSG, says there's been miserly for 4 years, and that's ridiculous for a top club. And someone else says, yes, I am worried, I am panicking a little bit, but better business. Look, Szoboszlai and the other business before, and everything will be smooth from there. Right, next, could Amadou Onana be heading to Manchester United this month? Be for the latest on that and Harry Maguire's future. Just over 10 minutes to go until half-time in the first of the Women's World Cup semi-finals. It's still 0-0 between Spain and Sweden, although Spain do have an attacking free kick as we speak. Remember, in the group stages, Spain were brilliant against Costa Rica and Zambia. They changed the team a lot against Japan and lost that one 4-0. But other than that, they've been fairly comfortable in the tournament so far. That 5-1 win against Switzerland before beating Netherlands and Sweden also. Pretty good group stage for them as well. But 0-0 at the moment. Right, 17 days to go left in this transfer window. And we have some breaking news. And it's good news for Aston Villa. We've been expecting this one, but Villa are closing in on a deal to take Galatasaray attacking midfielder Nicolo Zaniolo on loan. Unai Emery is keen to get cover for Emi Buendia, who suffered a serious knee injury in training last week and is likely to be out for much of the season. It's expected that he'll arrive in Birmingham tomorrow to complete a medical and finalise the move to Villa Park. Talks are ongoing with the possibility of an option to buy being included, but at the moment it is simply a loan move, Zaniolo from Galatasaray to Aston Villa. And that is actually great timing because with the first weekend of the Premier League season out of the way, it gave us a chance to assess who needs what right now. And when I said perfect timing, Kassam is going to talk about Aston Villa.
Yeah, they've been really unfortunate with knee injuries in the last few weeks. Obviously, Buendia got his injury, and then Tyrone Mings, it looked like it happened out of the blue as well. And obviously, for a player that was their captain, but obviously is that type of figure on the pitch anyway, that is going to be a huge miss. But they did sign Pau Torres in the summer. But I think now that Zaniolo is potentially going to get over the line, I think they're going to go in for another centre-back because I think he does like having a few options, especially with the amount of football that they're going to be playing this season. But if you look at the team that Aston Villa have, they do seem quite settled. Obviously, the result didn't reflect that because Newcastle played really well and beat them 5-1. But I think when you look at the squad and what he's trying to build there, I don't think that there's too many things that they need to change.
I love that. Great squad, lost 5-1. But
Just had to get in there.
But you are right. You're absolutely right. They're a very, very good squad from Villa. A lot of big things expect from them this season, and just that slip up on the first day, I'm sure, won't change that. We're going to stay in the Midlands for you, Olivia. Who have you gone for?
Yeah, I think we all owe Wolves and Gary O'Neill an apology because I think every single... And I know it's obviously difficult to judge after one game, but I think every single person was so pleasantly surprised with what they saw at Old Trafford. And really, they should have come away with all 3 points. They had 23 shots last night, way more than Man United. Just couldn't find the back of the net, and some of the chances they had. I know they've obviously lost Raul Jimenez, and whether he would have made a difference, I don't know. But obviously played with Sarabia up top. But Mateus Cunha looked like Messi last night. He was absolutely unbelievable. And you just think maybe with a striker, you know, that maybe just would be complete. Because if they play like that every week, Wolves will be absolutely fine. And you know, a lot of people had them to go down, you know, and again, it's like I say, difficult to judge after one game, but to go to Old Trafford with a manager that's been appointed for 3 days against an Eric Ten Hag side who's had the job for a year. He's done a really good job with that Manchester United side when you compare them from the start of last season to now. But I was just so pleasantly surprised with Wolves, and they outplayed Manchester United. I saw more from them than I did from United, and I think that says a lot.
Yeah, Wolves were absolutely excellent last night. And James, that brings us on to Everton, who actually played really well on Saturday, but ultimately it was a bad result for them. What do they need to do?
Yeah, they did it. I mean, it's difficult to talk about positives when you lose the opening game of the season at home to Fulham, but they created 19 chances. You feel like they just needed somebody to get on the end of them. They've strengthened in wide areas in this window, Danjuma and Harrison, but it does still feel like they need another striker. Yes, they signed Yusuf Chamiti in recent days, but he's a young player. I don't think you can be expecting a huge amount from him this season. Now, Dominic Calvert-Lewin missed that opening game this season. He's going to play in a behind closed doors friendly today against Manchester United, having missed the Fulham game. But I don't think, based on the way his injury record has been in recent years, they can count on him. Neil Maupay still just one Premier League goal for Everton. They are looking at Willy Gnonto as well as they look to increase their attacking options they have. And also, a word on outgoing. Southampton are trying to sign Mason Holgate on a season-long loan from Everton. I think Everton, with their financial situation at the moment, they would prefer to sell the defender or have a loan with an obligation to buy. But there are a number of clubs interested in him because he doesn't look like he's in favour under Sean Dyche.
OK, so it's Everton, Wolves and Aston Villa in transfer talk. We'll have 3 other clubs that we think could be busy between now and the end of the window. A reminder of the breaking news we've just brought you, and that's that Aston Villa are closing in on a deal to take Galatasaray attacking midfielder Nicolo Zaniolo on loan. He's expected to arrive for a medical tomorrow. Next, we've got the latest from Newcastle as their new signing gets off to a superb start. We're going to break away from transfers for a moment to hear from the England head coach Serena Wiegman ahead of tomorrow's huge World Cup semi-final, where she's been discussing the rivalry with the opponents Australia.
Yeah, I ask players and I ask staff, and actually they're, for us and for them, so now it's for us too, we don't feel that rivalry that much. The main thing is that there's a lot of rivalry in rugby and cricket, that's mainly, and well, last week in netball. So we just know it's a going to be a very competitive game. Lots of players from Australia also play in the Women's Super League, so they know each other really well. And of course they want to beat us, but we want to beat them. So that's the main competitiveness we will get in front of us tomorrow.
Next question from the back.
Steve Scott from ITV. Millie, one for you. You've already touched on the crowd. There will be 75,000 in there, and 95% of them are going to want you to lose. How do you prepare for that hostility? Is there anything you can do?
I think we're always preparing for that. I think no matter the opponent, their fans are always going to want the opposition to lose. That's football. But I think, again, for us, we focus on ourselves. We know that we're going to have fans there. Yes, they're probably going to have more. But like I said, we've been in these moments before, and as players, we embrace these moments. And it's all about us just, like I said, sticking to tasks, executing the game plan, and yeah, embracing the moment. It's a semi-final, it's a World Cup. You want that environment. You want it to be tense. You want it to be noisy. You know, it's a proud moment in the women's game where people turn on the TV back home and they see what an incredible atmosphere we've created. So credit to Australia for selling out the stadium and creating that atmosphere, because, you know, like we always know, the women's game is still on a journey, but what a place to be.
Right, Manchester United have an interest in Everton midfielder Amadou Onana. However, they are yet to make an offer for the player. Everton would demand around £60 million for the Belgian international, who does have a number of suitors. Right, so Manchester United, you watched them last night, Olivia, and in midfield we're told that they might be keen to bring someone in, especially with Fred going. Is Onana the type of midfielder they need?
I mean, I think potentially, I think midfield has to be a priority, especially after watching them against Wolves. I mean, Casemiro, we know how brilliant he is, but he was just getting exposed because Bruno Fernandes was playing as a number 10. And with Mason Mount, yes, he's playing in midfield, but he's so good at pressing that often he's so far up the pitch. And it was just leaving Casemiro so exposed. And Wolves exploited that. Now, Amadou Onana is a brilliant player. He's got so much to his game. And I think he would be an excellent addition to that Manchester United midfield, because I do think they need options. But I still think a number 6 should be a priority. And they've got Scott McTominay. Really wouldn't surprise me if we saw him play against Spurs this weekend, just because of how open that Manchester United midfield was. So I would think he would be a welcome addition. However, I do think their priorities right now should be a number 6 to play next to Casemiro.
What else do you think we learned from watching them last night, James?
I think we learned a lot. I don't think you want to necessarily draw too many conclusions from the first game, but it's difficult not to. Wolves had 23 shots yesterday, and most of those opportunities seem to come from Wolves running straight through the heart of United's midfield, which didn't seem to exist at times. And whilst you don't want to draw too many conclusions, it doesn't feel that Casemiro and Mount as a two in midfield is going to work with Bruno further ahead, especially if Mount is going to press the way that he did, because Casemiro's left on his own on a number of occasions. He looked pretty sluggish, but he did look pretty sluggish at the beginning of last season and then came into his own and showed just how good he was. So United fans will be hoping that he comes back to that sort of level of form, because he did look off the pace yesterday. You mentioned Scott McTominay. There is no way Manchester United are going to sell Scott McTominay based on what happened yesterday. He impressed when he came on as well, and maybe you're right, he could be the player in the meanwhile that plays alongside Casemiro, because that game against Spurs on Saturday is going to be box office. The way Spurs looked on Sunday and the way that Manchester United defended especially. So concerning signs for United, they were extremely lucky yesterday. I don't think they'll get away with that the rest of this season.
More on Manchester United on transfer talk from midday. But to another United now gets to Newcastle's 5-1 win over Aston Villa on Saturday. Next is champions Manchester City. Let's cross live to Newcastle's training ground, where our reporter Keith Downey is. Keith, good morning to you. Superb start to the season, and their new signings making an impact already.
Yeah, Tom, it took just 6 minutes for Sandro Tonali to open his Newcastle United account on Saturday in that 5-1 thumping of Aston Villa, didn't it? But I think it was his overall performance that impressed everyone even more. I've rarely seen a debut at St James's Park that good. Completely controlled the match from then on, and the second half it looked as though he'd been playing in that Newcastle United midfield for years. So a perfect start for Sandro Tonali. I think he's also ingratiating himself well with his teammates as well. There was a tweet that went round late last night. It appears to be going viral on social media, and I think it was Sandro in a local Wetherspoons in Newcastle. Tom, I think you've probably been there a couple of times yourself over the years. That's in Gosforth. Now, there was a table booked for two for Sandro Tonali, 7:45 last night, and he sat there. So that looked to me as though it maybe had the hallmarks of maybe one or two of his teammates on the wind-up last night. And now, I know there's not that many Italian restaurants in Newcastle, but I think it would take a lot for Sandro Tonali to himself choose to go to a Wetherspoons. But yeah, that maybe just gives you an insight into the team spirit that's around Newcastle United at the moment, and that was shown on Saturday, of course, wasn't it? But not just Tonali. You mention or you ask about other new signings. We saw Harvey Barnes come off the bench in the second half as well and score straight away, set one up for Callum Wilson. He scored two in the pre-season friendly the previous Sunday as well. So it looks as though Harvey Barnes will fit in perfectly to Eddie Howe's style. Tonali has done that, of course, with that superb 90 minutes on Saturday. And when we see the likes of Moises Caicedo and Romeo Lavia going for huge amounts of money, it looks as though Newcastle doing their business early in this transfer window, getting Tonali in for around £52 million was some great business, and he's one that's perhaps slipped below the radar. So yeah, Newcastle delighted, Tom, with their start to the season. It couldn't have gone any better for them, and as you say, they go to Manchester City this weekend in great form, in great mood, and they'll be desperate for that match to come around.
I remember being in that bar before a Tyne-Wear derby, and to get an alcoholic drink, because it was 9 in the morning, his kickoff was midday, get an alcoholic drink, you had to buy food with it, all right? That was the law. I've never seen so many discarded bacon and sausage sandwiches in my life. Piles of them and empty pint glasses. In terms of more incomings, Keith, is there more that Eddie Howe wants?
I mean, he went on record last week, Eddie Howe, and said that he'd love to have one more signing in. I understand that to be a defender. They look as though they're perhaps one short at the back. I think he would like to bring in a player who could come in and play left back. They've been playing Dan Burn left back for much of last season, when really he's a centre back playing out of position. So I think he would like to bring a left back in to come along and compete with Matt Targett in that position. So ideally he would like to add there. I can't see them going out and spending money on another player. In fact, Eddie Howe said that on Friday. He says, we don't have the money to go there and put it on the table due to FFP restrictions. They're at their limit as far as that is concerned. He says we need to be creative. So I think what they'll try and do is bring in a loan player with either an option or obligation to buy. Now, one player that I mentioned yesterday was the Arsenal left-back Kieran Tierney. This is a player Newcastle have been looking at for some time. There's been contact between parties all summer long, and it's certainly a player that Eddie Howe really likes. I think if he could add him, he would be delighted. But of course, Arsenal bought him 4 years ago for £25 million. They will not want to loan him out unless, I would suggest, there is an obligation to buy. But Arsenal have got their own injury issues at the moment. Julian Timbers picked up a knee injury, so that might complicate things a little bit further. This is the sort of one I would imagine, Tom, that would wait right until the end of the transfer window, when Newcastle, as they would hope, would be able to bring him or someone else in on loan with an option or obligation to buy. So I'm not expecting anything imminent, but they are looking to bring in one defender, and I think if they are able to do that, Eddie Howe will see this summer as a really good success, as he adds to Tino Livramento, Harvey Barnes and Sandro Tonali, who of course are already in the door for a combined amount of around about £125 million.
Could they possibly, if they want to raise some funds, could we see some departures?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one, because you could bring in a lot of money if you sold a Sven Botman or a Bruno Guimaraes, but of course they don't want to do that at this stage. There might come the time, this time next year, where they may have to sell a big name player for big money to allow them to get round FFP, trade and then reinvest it into the squad. That's what they've done with Alan St-Maximin. They brought in around £25 million for him. That then unlocked the door to allow them to go out and buy Barnes and Livramento. So they do need to trade, but they will not want to sell sell any of their big name players that they're building the squad around. There are 3 players who are currently training away from the group right now that I think if they were able to sell and get money in for, they would like to do that. Isaac Hayden, Jeff Hendrick and Ryan Fraser, but they're not going to command huge transfer fees, so that they're a little bit limited in terms of what they can do with that at the moment, Tom. If they were to get all 3 of them off the wage bill, that would be a perfect scenario, but it's difficult because all 3 of these guys are on big wages, Premier League wages, and you would suggest maybe 1 or 2 of them are probably more likely to play in the Championship next season. So it might again be a case where Newcastle loan them out and pay a large proportion of their wages at whoever the club is that they're loaned to. So difficult situation regarding those 3. They're training away from the group. Newcastle will not want to lose one of their big name stars. That may be the case this time next year, as I say, to allow them to get round FFP. But I think as it stands, I think they'll bring in 1 on loan if they can do, and then Eddie Howe will look at that as a successful transfer window. But as you can imagine, at Newcastle United, at training ground behind me this morning, talk is not about the transfer window. Talk is about that 5-1 win over Aston Villa at the weekend and what they can do at Manchester City this weekend.
Yeah, well, the mood up there certainly good at the moment, understandably so. Keith, thank you. Well, in terms of celebrity spotting in odd places, I remember seeing James Savundra in a nightclub called Prism in Portsmouth.
I was in bed before you that
night. Fair point. How impressed were you, Sam, with Newcastle on Saturday? They are getting a lot of praise, and rightly so.
Yeah, they were incredible. I think they probably had the most complete performance for any Premier League side this weekend. And obviously, it's easy to say that when a team wins 5-1, but even if they had won 2 or 3-1, the way they played and how comfortable and fluid their football was just incredible. And I think it's a credit to Newcastle and their recruitment that the players that they brought in have embedded into the team straight away. But also when you saw the changes that they made, Barnes coming on, Wilson coming on, the immediate impact that they had. I think that now I was a bit sceptical about where they're going to be in terms of the title conversation, in terms of cup competitions and Champions League football. But if that performance is anything to go by, I think they're going to be right at the top.
Yeah, and did anyone particularly stand out for you, James?
I thought Anthony Gordon, I thought he was such a threat on the left-hand side. He had quite a difficult start. He's had a difficult time of late. The move from Everton was a difficult one for him personally, but that success with the under-21s in the summer really seems to have kick-started his career. And, of course, you can't not mention Tonali. So comfortable in his debut, anticipated the game well, read the game well, was always looking to do something. And then, finally, Alexander Isak, it was just quite remarkable watching the way he went about his goals. That second one in particular, I think he's going to be unbelievable this season. Harvey Barnes coming off the bench, playing the way he did. They're looking in a good place. City and Liverpool up next. They'll go there with real belief.
They will. Right, Good Morning Transfers is back at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. This team is back for Transfer Talk at midday with Italian football experts Mina Rizzucchi and Nicky Bandini. And the Transfer Show is on at 5 o'clock and 6 p.m. tonight because, of course, there's a soccer special. Right, the football show is next. I'll be reacting to Manchester United's 1-0 win over Wolves in a few more minutes. It's 0-0 in the first World Cup semi-final.